Good evening, everyone, and I hope you are well. I see Hank is in the chat. Good evening to you, Hank. Good evening to everyone else. I'm not going to lie. Everything that I wanted to talk about today has completely changed as today has gone on. And for those of you, hello from LA. Hello, Paul. nice to see you, the people from the best coast, because as they say, best coast is left coast. So good evening to you. What we are evening Kit Kats. I'll just wait for more people to come in. I'll just do a bit more vamping. Oh boy. The two big things. Well, depends if we get to that third thing, because I'm still thinking of covering, shall we say, Nigel Farage's GB News adventures. It's certainly going to be interesting, but I'm sure, as you may very well agree, not only the topic on stream, as we've got on screen at the on screen at the moment, the fact that the Northern Ireland Protocol is in jeopardy. And literally, I don't know where this is going to go, and we'll get into that in a bit. But after that, we're going to go over the Cummings Kissenberg interview, and particularly how some people on the left have reacted to this interview, because the way they've reacted is dumb, very, very dumb. We'll get into that later. So, and it's typical. Last week, I had an entire stream talking about Dominic Cummings, and what does he go and do? What does he go and do? What does he go and do? He goes and does this. So we'll be talking again briefly about Cummings' interview that he had yesterday on the BBC. And like I say, we'll be going over especially how the left has reacted to this, because I think the way that they've reacted to this is a completely stupid arrangement, how this happened. But what are we talking about today? Well, we've got to start off with, indeed, the breaking news. And that is straight away that the Northern Ireland Protocol is in jeopardy. For those of you who haven't been paying attention to this, it's quite easy to miss, probably if you're not from the UK, but I will explain the situation. So, the Northern Ireland Protocol was created as part of the post-Brexit withdrawal agreement, essentially because we cannot put a hard border between the north of Ireland and the Republic. Flat out, we just cannot do that. That is an international treaty, and to break that international treaty would essentially make the UK an international pariah, and we would suffer extremely hard consequences. Extremely hard consequences for doing this. So, as a compromise, what happened was that we created a border in the Irish Sea, hence the Northern Ireland Protocol, effectively keeping Northern Ireland in the single market and customs union. Hence why there are checks at the border happening when peoples go from the UK to Northern Ireland. So it keeps that border between the north and the rest of Ireland open. So hopefully you're all up to date on that. But 2 weeks ago, if you may remember, we made an entire video covering of the fact that essentially the Brexiteers do not like the Northern Ireland Protocol. And this isn't new, by the way. This isn't new. This has been going on since the very, very beginning. They have not liked it at all, even though they voted for it. But Theresa May, just a couple, the previous prime minister, they were saying how this would be a betrayal and that no prime minister of any caliber should ever vote for such a conceivable thing. And yet, just a couple of literally less than 6 months ago now, this is exactly what they voted for. After years of saying that they would never, ever vote for such a thing, they voted for it. And now we're here, beginning of 2020, beginning of Brexit properly. And what happens? Boris Johnson puts in to essentially be in charge of Britain's negotiating position the guy who was negotiating this very Northern Ireland Protocol and the withdrawal agreement, David Frost, now Lord Frost. We'll call him Frosty for this for the rest of this. Because quite frankly, does not deserve to be a lord, and quite frankly, I do not respect him anywhere near enough to address him at least in his proper name or even title. So, ever since the beginning, they have been adamant that the Northern Ireland Protocol needs to go because it, quote, doesn't work. If you are aware of the situation at the border, then you know full well the reason why the Northern Ireland Protocol does not work is that A, there are not enough customs officials, first of all, hired by the UK. Second of all, there is no infrastructure. And we're not talking about roads here. We're talking about sites to check the lorries, to check the shipments, officers to check documentation, vets as well, so that they can perform checks on goods, meat, and other phytosanitary products going across the border. There needs to be these checks because it's going technically now into another territory and country. That is what they officially set up. That is what they agreed to. And you're about to hear this. Remember this. Everything you hear, everything that you hear, all these complaints of the Brexiteers in the next couple of weeks, because trust me, my prediction is that this will probably be the big bust up of the summer. This is how it's going to go down. It is going to be absolutely, it's going to be a brawl of epic proportions. Now, part of me wants to think that this is just, and I hope it turns out to be, just kabuki theatre. Essentially, that this is all just pretend from our side, because in their heart of hearts, the Brexiteers know that Brexit doesn't work, and that eventually, sooner or later, they are going to have to accommodate the EU. It is the far bigger power. The lies that they needed us more than we needed them are completely false from day one. So we are now in this situation. So I hope that's caught everyone up on the situation and that you are now all up to date. But of course, 2 weeks ago, David Frost came out and said that the Northern Ireland Protocol wasn't going to work and wasn't working because apparently the EU were being intransigent about it. Basically, blaming the EU for something that he signed, he created, he negotiated, that it's not working. And to quote the Northern Ireland Assembly Minister, I can't remember her name, but she was from Sinn Féin, put it very simply. To say that Northern Ireland Protocol does not work is completely ridiculous. Frost's fingerprints are all over this deal. And yet now he's the one saying that this isn't going to work. We are literally standing at a point where it is just unbelievable the amount of stupidity. The unbelievable amount of stupidity that we are seeing regarding this. It is unbelievable on just epic proportions. But there you go. That's the situation that we are in. And of course, Lord Frost today delivered to the Lords. He intended to go to the EU to essentially make changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol. And literally, it was less than, it was an hour ago, but it's 2 hours at this point. Less than 2 hours ago, the EU has basically completely rejected the complete proposal to have any changes in the Northern Ireland Protocol. And they've said it themselves. You signed this, you agreed to it, start implementing it and following it. So the big question is then what happens? And we'll get to that after this clip. But yeah, the stupidity in our government is mind-boggling. It's truly, truly mind-boggling at this point.
From the European Commission, who have said a firm no to what Lord Frost said earlier on in the House of Commons today.
Yeah, the timeline of this is that Lord Frost stood up, made his statement. It became clear that the British government wanted a complete renegotiation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. The initial response was muted. Frankly, from my perspective, it was a series of messages coming to me from people who sent rolling eyes emojis, the text being, we've heard this all before, we are fed up of this rhetoric. But then we got a statement from the Vice President of the European Commission, Maros Sefcovic, who is effectively now in charge of enacting Brexit negotiations. And Maros Sefcovic said this: we will continue to engage with the UK on the suggestions made today. We are ready to continue to seek creative solutions within the framework of the protocol in the interest of all communities in Northern Ireland. However, he said, we will not agree to a renegotiation of the protocol.
So once again, the EU standing very, very firm on its commitment to the peace agreement in Northern Ireland. Straight up and down, confirming it will reconfirm its commitments to Northern Ireland and to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, why do they not want to reopen this renegotiation of the protocol? Essentially, as he's about to tell you, the EU is fed up of excuses being made by the Tory party for how the Northern Ireland Protocol does not work, when it is up to them to make sure it works. They are the ones who signed this agreement. They are the ones who signed up to it and agreed on it. Any renegotiation or anything like that would be absolutely ridiculous, because what do you renegotiate? Well, we know what they want to renegotiate. They want to remove the European Court of Justice as being the arbiter for any problems at that border. That is essentially what they want to renegotiate. They are trying to essentially, what we've seen and talked about it before, they want to essentially pick apart the Northern Ireland Protocol piece by piece. Because if they succeed in taking out the European Court of Justice for dispute resolution at this border here, then what can they go after next? And that is indeed the intended point for much of this protocol, this angst that they are putting out against, the EU, and none of it makes a damn bit of sense. Because just a couple of months ago, the entire Tory party was celebrating this very deal as being a world-beating deal. This is absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking that our government just does not seem to understand the situation it herself has put it in. And this is them who have negotiated this, by the way. And Frost, we may even watch his speech a little later, to get up and sign and do this. I'm sorry, it just beggars belief. it just completely beggars belief about all this. It's completely unbelievable. But this is the situation that we're in, and one of the fun things, of course, you may have seen a lot of newspaper articles about problems along the Northern Ireland border. The one in the sea, shall we say, the Northern Ireland Protocol, along that now UK Northern Ireland border. You may have seen lots of problems regarding trade with businesses and so on. It's been very, very low level. But what the funny thing is that is what our border with the EU is going to look like in a couple of months' time. Because they have so far, the Tories have succeeded in managing to kick the can of all these checks that are meant to be going on at the border for the time being. They've managed to kick the can down the road. Now, come October, that is when the first lot of serious checks come into play. And then from then, right up until March of next year, when everything should be fully implemented, that is what should be in. Now, potentially what we are seeing here could be very well Boris Johnson and the Tories preparing, although I'm loath to give them any sort of intelligence. If you've seen the Cummings interview yesterday, it's truly an interesting plan if this is what they think they can get away with on a potentially even bigger level, because this is damaging us and our relations with the EU monumentally, and at least until we can get a government in that understands that yes, the UK needs the EU. This is how the antagonism is going to continue for some time. For some time. And I'm genuinely in shock about this. But anyway, we'll let the report continue, because it gets even worse. If you think you've heard the worst, get ready, buckle in, folks, because we're in for a ride.
And since then, a number of diplomats here have said to me, read what Šefčovič said, and that is our line too. I think most of the EU have pretty quickly rolled in behind. Now, one of the things that annoys the European Union enormously is the suggestion that they hear from the British government that it is they, the European nations, who are jeopardising the Good Friday Agreement. The EU response is inevitably that one of their member states, Ireland, is clearly fundamental to the Good Friday Agreement, and that they are acting on their behalf. And to that end, Prime Minister of Ireland, Michael Martin, was speaking a little bit earlier and giving his reaction, determination, I think, to see some sort of movement, but also he knows that he's part of the EU. Here's what he had to say.
Like I say, this just gets more and more monumental stupid the more and more we hear about this. But I can't believe this is the level that we've got to. But this is it, folks. This is going to be the row of the summer. If you thought that the sausage wars that ended just a couple of weeks ago at this point were a big how to do, then we have yet to see the full extent of this. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous, but here we go.
The European Union has always been ready to engage in a positive way. There has to be quid pro quo, there has to be engagement on both sides. The European Union stands ready to engage with the United Kingdom in relation to these issues. And that's where it rests right now.
Let me give you a bit of reaction also that's come to me from senior diplomats here in Brussels, those who would be involved in the renegotiations. One just came to me and said, Brussels has grown wary of the Tory party constantly being perpetrator and victim of its own actions. The Northern Ireland Protocol was a stepping stone for the trade agreement. You can't alter one and expect the other to stay. That, by the way, raising the spectre that were you somehow to persuade the EU to strip out the European Court of Justice and renegotiate the Northern Ireland Protocol, there is a belief here that that would mean having to reopen talks around the entire withdrawal agreement. For everyone who celebrated the end of Brexit talks, that is the spectre that now sits on the horizon. And this from another very senior figure in European politics. Northern Ireland Protocol was negotiated and signed by Boris Johnson. It was ratified by the UK Parliament. We now expect the UK to implement what it has negotiated, signed and ratified. No ifs, no buts, no excuses. That is a theme you hear a lot here, that the UK signed up to this. You have to put it in action. You can't buy a house, get to the point where you hand over the money and then say, it's outrageous how much you're charging me. Their contention is always that Britain signed up for this. And by the way, one final thought, the idea according to EU diplomats I've spoken to, that A, they would reopen negotiations, but B, that they would take the European Court of Justice out of this deal, they say is utterly fanciful. There is a thought in their minds that this is all a stalling tactic, that if the UK government really is proposing this, then everyone knows that this is a proposal that is simply unacceptable.
So that was literally just 2 hours ago that we got that. And as you can see, the EU are super annoyed by all this. So am I. Again, this is completely and utterly has no fault of the EU. It entirely rests upon the current UK government. They are the ones at fault. They are the ones who negotiated this agreement. They are the ones who signed it. And they are the ones who are now saying, for whatever reason, that this is just simply impossible. We now have to change the agreement. Well, if you change the agreement now, as we just heard a moment ago there, you now have to go back and renegotiate the full thing. So those past 2 years that we saw all around essentially just trying to do this very thing to get to this point is going to have to start again. And I know a lot of you laughed at me, what is it, a year or two ago now, where I said that Brexit would be never ending because it favors the current Tory government because it makes them look tough. They get to play to their audience at home and they get to say, oh, look how tough we are taking on Brussels. But in reality, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing because, as we said before, if there is so much trouble at the border at the moment with involving the Northern Ireland Protocol border in the Irish Sea, what's it going to look like when we hit October and we have to start putting checks on our end? How is that going to work? And I keep on saying to everyone, we are going to be hit with the ABCs: austerity, Brexit, and COVID. This is the worst part, because all these three things are going to come together, especially next year, and are going to create a huge storm. So if you think that 2020 was bad and that 2021 maybe was slightly better, but still bad in some way, wait until 2022. because by that point, we're going to see the rest of Europe start to recover, because pretty much every single other European country has a COVID recovery plan lasting at least ranging from about 3 to 6 years in terms of lasting for support for businesses and, of course, the people in their countries. We don't even have a COVID recovery plan. All that's happened is that Rishi Sunak has given these people a very token amount of money, and that is somehow going to last them through the hard times. And by the way, this isn't a grant, given to them by the country, pretty much like every single other European country is doing. No, this is a loan. So they will be expected to repay that loan. And if our economy goes completely bottom up, and these companies then can't start to repay that loan, we enter into other huge problems. Because I just do not want to think of the potential possibility about this. Because this just goes on and on and on and on and on. And I will say this now, the only solution for Northern Ireland is for the UK to rejoin the European Economic Area, basically the single market and customs union. That is the only way that we can do this. You could literally do that with a stroke of a pen and initiate that, and it would be problem solved. Problem solved completely. And then we can still be in the single market. We can pretty much be Norway. We can go and do our own trade agreements, but, we have to go to the EU and say, is this all right for us to do? And by the way, they very much say yes to pretty much everything Norway does. So it would be a pretty good deal. It wouldn't satisfy everyone who wanted to remain, like myself. I'd much rather prefer to be a full member of the European Union. I think it suits the UK's interest far more to be in that. But there you go. So what's this? Die Reiter. This is not just a row, Bowler. You haven't even seen the beginning yet. At the moment, it's just Boris Pampers throwing a tantrum. Wait until the EU react. Well, this is the EU reacting. They've just said, no, we're rejecting your calls for changing it outright. And now we're about to see what happened this afternoon when Lord Frost stood up in the House of Lords and basically said, Northern Ireland Protocol isn't working and we want to change it. So we're going to have a listen to what Frost said in the House of Lords.
Very simply, we cannot go on as we are. My lords, there is no doubt that we have tried to operate the protocol in good faith. We worked throughout 2020 to finalise the areas left open by the protocol text itself, without, of course, knowing what the real-world impacts on the ground of those decisions would be. This year, we're planning to invest around £500 million in delivering systems and support services to operate the protocol. We have worked with business to help their preparations for the new trading arrangements. But nevertheless, as we have sought to operate the protocol, it is clear that its burdens have been the source of considerable and ongoing disruption to lives and livelihoods.
I just want to point out, just a few moments ago, he said, oh, we had no idea about the problems and the real-world implications of all this. I call shenanigans on that. Press X to doubt, as they say in LA Noire. because this is the government, and it's a government's job to know and think about what it potentially stands to do. Why on earth would a government spend all that time negotiating and not at least look or even think about the potential impacts of a deal it was about to sign? If not, we have a completely incompetent government. And if it's the other way, well, then we have a completely incompetent government. And either way, we have a completely incompetent government in charge. And that is even more shocking. But there you go.
We have seen reductions in supermarket product lines. We have seen more than 200 suppliers decide they would no longer sell to Northern Ireland. We've seen difficulties not just on the famous chilled meats issue, but on medicines, on pets, on movements of live animals, on seeds and plants, and on many others. All dimensions of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement need to be respected. That is Northern Ireland's integral place in our United Kingdom, just as much as the north-south dimension of the agreement. Yet there is a growing sense in Northern Ireland that we have not found the right balance, seen in an ongoing febrile political climate, protests and regrettable instances of occasional disorder.
Thank you very much, Paul Murray, for the support there. Thank you very much. But yeah, as you can see, he's talking about stuff which is the very, very concept and implications of what he's just said. It was his job to negotiate this deal. As was said not too long ago in the Northern Ireland Assembly, Frost's fingerprints are all over this deal. So the very fact that he didn't know or didn't understand how this would work is completely ridiculous. Yeah. True. Lost in the Irish Triangle, the new movie, coming to a world theatre soon. True. I'm lost for words. I really, really am. And to be honest, if I were in the House of Lords and I was listening to him say this, I would be heckling him all the way through this speech, just shouting, "You're the one who negotiated this deal. You're the one who signed it. You're the one." And I'd just be saying that to him over and over again. Oh, yes, and don't worry, Pat. We will be getting to Dominic Cummings after this. Don't worry. Like I say, we were just literally all changed from what we were originally going to discuss, but never mind. These things happen. Oh. And yes, you are. Nope. This is still what I'm waiting for. This is not the Brexit we voted for. I am still waiting for that newspaper headline to happen. When it does, I will buy that newspaper and I will frame it and I will place it on my wall. Because I am waiting. We've already seen, just in the past week, the Daily Mail write stories about how something's going on in British supermarkets. What's going on in British supermarkets? Not mentioning, Brexit being the number one primary cause of it, but they're getting there slowly but surely. They can't dance around the issue forever. Oh, Pretty Bird, late to the stream. Oh, shocking. If you are watching us on YouTube, then please do remember to hit that bell. It does signal when I do go live. So, we'll see you. You'll be able to get a notification when I do go live in the future. So, let's listen to more of this absolute cavalcade of excuses that this man, who is responsible for the very agreement he is so annoyed isn't working, is talking about.
And strains within a power-sharing executive already dealing with an unprecedented pandemic. We've worked...
Strains in the power-sharing agreement. That's another thing, by the way, that many people might not realise. There is, at the moment, in the Northern Ireland Assembly, a very serious political problem going on. And it starts when Arlene Foster was booted out by her own party. And then you had another guy come in who agreed to it, but then was booted out again by his own party after 21 days. And now you've got Poots potentially looking to stand up and becoming First Minister. And that's only part of the equation over there, because as recent surveys have shown over in Northern Ireland, especially in voting intention, the DUP support has been split by two other very unionist parties, essentially meaning at the potential next general election, which they are doing everything in their power to try and avoid, it could mean that Sinn Féin win a majority and becomes First Minister. Now, if that happens, Sinn Féin will very likely push for an independence referendum. And generally at the moment, even though there's again has been a lot of support for a Northern Ireland rejoining, I must remind people about this. Just because Northern Ireland rejoins with the rest of Ireland does not mean that the troubles in Northern Ireland will just magically end overnight. Because the unionist population given to the now essentially the voting pool of Northern Ireland means that they would command a very significant minority in essentially the Irish Parliament. And it would be a very significant minority. I think it would be about 12 to 14%, I think they would command. And that would make them quite a significant party in Northern Ireland politics. So there would be that first to deal with. Next of all, of course, you would have the violence. Like I say, he's just mentioned, Frost has said there, that there was indeed violence. These were not caused by Republicans. These were caused by unionists. We don't know what could happen, how they would react. The fact that there are paramilitary units out there, one who, again, very recently, apparently even got involved in that recent DUP election to elect their next leader and intimidated one of their leaders into not standing. Now, that is unconfirmed. I want to say that at that point. It is unconfirmed that that has happened, but that is shows you how volatile Northern Ireland really is. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that. And a lot of people just don't seem to understand that. It is very, very delicate. And this entire Northern Ireland situation has smashed it all to pieces. Oh, thank you very much, Rob Harpin, for that. Keep saying, fella, keep going. Well, I'll try. I'll try. Like I say, oh my, this, Brexit has just gone from one thing to another. It's really insane. So, this one from Dayton. Do you think the country can recover from this deep internal political division? Yes. Yes, eventually it will. You cannot keep a lie going forever. Simple as that. You literally just cannot keep the lie that Brexit is working and that it is the best thing for this country it cannot be sustained. It just cannot, because sooner or later you have to talk and seriously address the problems. And the problem is Brexit. And no matter how later on, let's say another maybe 10, 15 years down the line, you are going to have to go, hey, look, Brexit is still causing a problem. You know, the idea as well that young people as well are also going to propel this argument forward as well, because most young people now coming more and more into voting age are overwhelmingly in favor of the European Union. It's going to be absolute chaos in this country, especially next year. Next year is going to be, if you think this is the peak of stupidity, we have yet to reach the peak. We have really yet to reach the peak of this. But anyway, we'll continue with this more cavalcade of excuses that he's got for us.
Works with the EU to try to address these challenges. Some avenues for progress have been identified in certain areas, but overall, those discussions have not got to the heart of the problem. Put very simply, we cannot go on as we are. My lords, we have therefore had to consider all our options.
And that's scary. That is scary when he says that we have to consider all our options, because that could mean a potential triggering of Article 16. And I've been saying for a while now that if Boris Johnson thinks that it is politically advantageous move for him to do that, he will. Hang the consequences. That is what Boris Johnson will do. Boris Johnson serves no one but his own interests. And if activating Article 16 to essentially play to the home fans, then Boris will do just that. And that is where what he said there, that maintaining all options, having all options on the table, becomes a very, very worrying and frightening prospect.
In particular, we have looked carefully at the safeguards provided by Article 16 of the Protocol. These exist to deal with significant societal and economic difficulties, as well as with trade diversion. It is clear that the circumstances exist to justify the use of Article 16. Nevertheless, my lords, we have concluded that it's not the right moment to do so. Instead, we see an opportunity to proceed differently, to find a new path, to seek to agree with the EU through negotiations, a new balance in our arrangements covering Northern Ireland to the benefit of all. And it's in that spirit that today's command paper outlines the new balance that we wish to find. It is a balance which needs to ensure that goods can circulate much more freely within the UK customs territory, while ensuring that full processes are applied to goods destined for the EU. It's a balance which needs to enable all in Northern Ireland to continue to have normal access to goods from the rest of the UK, by allowing goods meeting both UK and EU standards to circulate there.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be joining the House in the 60th anniversary edition of...
I think you'll agree that was generally a very worrying speech. And the big point of worrying about it was, of course, him talking about Article 16. Oh, hang on, we won't go back to that.
Could very simply.
Because we've been hearing from.
We'll go back to that. Yeah. So this is what's so worrying. And this is the state that we are in, that we are run currently by the most hard right government, even since Margaret Thatcher, even arguably more far right than Margaret Thatcher's very own hard right government. But that's where we are. They are in control, overall control, with a very big majority of about 84 seats. They can pretty much do whatever they want, but at the same time, that works against them because no one can technically stop them. So they've got no excuses. No excuses for saying, oh, you don't understand, we didn't have a big enough majority for this to get through. So in a way, that big majority does work against them because no one can stop them from doing what they want to do. The U-turns that we've seen on some bills, for example, we knew that the working time directive was coming up to be axed. There was a big hoopla about that, so they backed down about it. And I have said before, if you want to get involved in British politics, because some people in this country just think that we live in a democracy every 4 to 5 years. We do not. We live in a democracy every single day of the year. If you want to get involved in politics, if you want to help make a change, it does not take a lot of time. Watch the news, watch people like me, Max and Phil, and there are, of course, other, UK YouTubers. Write to your MP. Again, I always advocate that. Write to your MP. Go to your local council meetings. Well, you don't even have to go to your local council meetings because many of them are live streamed. Get involved with your politics. Join a political party. Get involved. That is one of my biggest messages for this. Get involved. If you want to make a change, if you want to make a change in this country, you have to get up and you have to get involved. If you are not going to do that, then you live in a democracy once every 4 to 5 years. Don't do that. Live in a democracy 365 days a year. And you can do that by getting involved. And it does not take a lot. It may seem like it. It may seem like effort. But the reward is living in a better country. And quite frankly, that is worth putting the effort in. That is the goal. That is what I want to do. That is what the country I would, think about the country that you want to live in, not the country that you live in. Because I know the UK can be a better place. I know we can be better. And even some moderate conservatives think that as well, as we saw in the Cheshire and Amersham by-election. And as I've said before, I think Boris is walking a very, very tight tightrope, where on one side, he's trying to please his new northern voters. On the other hand, he's got his traditional southern Tory voters. And he is walking a very tight tightrope, where the more he appeals to the north, the more he loses the south. The more he appeals to the south, the more he loses the north. So this big majority that Boris has got cannot be sustained because it's regulation versus deregulation, global Britain versus leveling up. spending money versus saving money, austerity versus investing in this country. And we know the Tories by heart by now. We've had them in power well over 15 years. Well over 15 years. So we know the direction that they're going to go. They're not going to invest in this country. They're going to go even harder into austerity. And we know that's going to happen. Rishi Sunak even put it in the budget. An 8% budget cut coming for all departments. In fact, another thing, by the way, something else that I haven't seen mentioned too much today. The government today was going to announce a pay rise for NHS workers. And guess what? Guess what? No one in the government today announced a pay rise for NHS workers. So yet another, shocking as it may seem, lie by the government. So that's the current situation that we find ourselves in. And to be honest, it's hard to put into words. It really is. Because this is a situation of their own making. I have no sympathy for the Brexiteers. I have no sympathy for Brexit supporters who bang on about how wonderful Brexit is. But then the second you bring up examples of Brexit going wrong or problems, it's not Brexit that's done it. It must be the EU. And it is shocking that you've got this going on. But that's the point we live in. Dude, just run for Ireland. You didn't vote for this. And you will suffer under this. True. But I want to make this country better. And I bear no, as I've said before, Ireland is my last emergency escape plan. If things start to really go bad here, then, you know, you can always pull the emergency chute and try and run over to Ireland. It's just a shame that I don't have any Irish ancestors. But maybe it's something I should look into. So, that's the breaking news section for this over. Like I said at the beginning, that story broke, what? It was an hour ago to begin with, what? 3 hours ago at this point. So you've literally had as fresh a news as you can have it. But we're going to go back to this guy. Because last week, you may remember, there we go. Because as you may remember, last week, I did an entire stream about Dominic Cummings. And of course, again, I don't know if Dominic Cummings will ever see this video, but like I said last time, I would generally like to talk to you, Mr. Cummings. I really, really, really would. Just from like a very personal, interesting spectre. I would generally just look. There's so many questions that I don't hear asked. And I don't know if it's because maybe it is a dumb question. Maybe you don't hear them asked very often, but I would generally love to ask him about like his personal politics, what he thinks about current policies in this government. He talks about change, but what type of change does he actually want to begin? Like I say, I would genuinely love to talk to him. Like I say, I have reached out to Dominic Cummings to say I would love to talk to you. I would love to have him on this stream. And I would generally just love to sit down with him, just have a serious chat. I've even said, if the restrictions are gone and he's all right with it, we can sit down in a local pub and have a chat. Now, obviously, I'm not being very big-headed about this. I think there's less than 1% chance Dominic Cummings even does that. But as they say, if you don't ask, you don't know. So I've asked, and we'll have to see. Oh, thank you very much, Helen, for the donation there. Yeah. Yeah. We're missing talking about Farage saving GB News. Well, we'll see how quickly we get through this. If not, maybe we'll have a look at that. Might be a point. Let me see if maybe, depending on how long it takes to go through this, we'll have a look in on Jeff, and we'll see how Jeff has taken to the revelations of this Cummings interview. See what he has to say about all this. But we'll get to that in a bit later. See if we've got time for it. But what is Spotlight? Why are we talking about it? What's going on? So, as you know, yesterday, big interview. Dominic gave his big first interview since leaving Number 10. And like many people, since he gave his, bombshell at the MP inquiry, which was meant to be 2 hours, but turned into a 7-hour marathon. So it's becoming very, very likely that what Cummings has to say about the government is very likely true. I've always said take everything Cummings says with a grain of salt, because I think that there is definitely a pinch of narcissism about it. His claims, he's fully said that he's willing to go on the record. He will say what he's exactly said, not only in the Kunsberg interview, but during when he was giving evidence to MPs. He will do this under oath. And if he's willing to go that far to say that he's willing to say these exact same things under oath, that he has text messages, he has emails, and there are other people willing to corroborate that these events were true, then I am willing to believe that what Dominic Cummings has said here is more than likely the truth. Now, of course, there is, again, a bit of, shall we say, as they say in the press, when you have a source that comes to you that you don't know, or who might have been from an enemy camp, you've got to trust but verify. So with Cummings and all this, what I say to anyone on the left, because this is what we're talking about, Spotlight is a very lefty, shall we say, news site here in the UK, I would say trust but verify. I am willing to trust Cummings with what he says about these revelations. I'm also waiting for the verification. And on his blog, he has released text messages to back up what he has said. He is saying that he's willing to do this under oath, and that not only do text messages and emails exist, but other people are also willing to back him up on that as well. And yeah, you are right, Chris. This is what I'm about to say. Why is he doing this? That's the big thing. And I think a lot of people on the left are obsessed with this. Why is he doing this? What's he doing? Well, it's, as Chris has beat me to the punch there, most of it is probably because he wants to go work for someone else at a later date. Or he wants to at least, shall we say, have a bit of a better press image, which is okay, understandable. But what he is giving out here is fantastic ammunition for us to use against Boris and the Tories at the next general election. Make no mistake, not only will Cummings' evidence he gave to the MPs a month ago now, but also this interview and potentially other stuff. And even when it gets down to the COVID inquiry, which Labour should be using this as a massive opportunity to push. A massive opportunity to push. Well, we'll have to see. But at this point, I've just seen a perfect segue here. You take euros or only pounds. I don't mind, my friend. Like I say, thank you to everyone who's coming watching today. Thank you very much for your support. Please do remember to hit that like and share button. That helps out the channel massively. Super chats are open. There is links down below to support me on my Patreon page. And there is also a buy me a coffee link as well if you want to give me a one-off donation. And of course, as you've seen, super chats are coming in as well. But that's my shilling part done. That's my shilling part done. I've got to get it at least in at some point. But that's that done now. So he is here. This is ammunition we can use against the Tory party. So this is absolutely perfect. But there are people on the left who could potentially ruin this, such as this article that we're going to go through here. This very nice little summary that we've got going on. So, and it is quite a good, I will give it now, it's a good summarization, but we are going to go through some of these points because, as I said, we're going to get to the point of what some of these, the way that some people on the left are treating this. And if they decide not to use this ammunition and not to pick it up and fight with it, then you might as well be taking a knife to a gunfight, essentially. That is my opinion on this. And this is perfect ammunition for the next general election, even right up until then. And not only this, this is also really good ammunition to start getting in to Tory voters. If you know someone who is a Tory voter or a Tory supporter, start talking to them about these Dominic Cummings interviews. Have you seen it? What did you think to it? What do you think to this revelation? What do you think to this? Start planting these seeds now, my friends, because the next general election is 3 years away at this point. So it is not as far as you think. And 3 years is going to go very quickly. And if Boris Johnson gets rid of the Fixed Term Parliament Act, well, the next general election could be 2 years away. It could be a year and a half away. Because the whole point of Boris getting rid of the Fixed Term Parliament Act allows him the power to call a general election whenever he damn well pleases. So, for example, maybe this COVID inquiry gets off the ground, and Boris calls a general election before the inquiry can report, and we get the true story of just how horrific and a shambles the Tories were during this. And that report does not lead into the next general election, which may give Boris Johnson an edge if he does that. And like I say, we don't know at this point, but we're going to have to see. But like I say, watch very closely when they go for that, because they are trying to remove that. But anyway, let's jump into this then, shall we? So today's interview with Dominic Cummings was mesmerizing. It was a combination of weak questioning and a certain amount of groping around by Kunsberg for answers to suit a narrative that would make Cummings look self-obsessed and lacking in credibility, and a real insight into Cummings' personal agenda and sense of entitlement. First of all, I did not get the impression that this was what Kunsberg was going for. I think she was generally asking questions, and I think she herself was generally shocked by the responses she was getting. And I think that going after that is not really true. But of course, it's the typical BBC thing from the left. The BBC on the left is like the worst thing in the world. Of course, on the right, the BBC is like the worst thing in the world. The BBC is damned if it does, damned if it doesn't. It's the unfortunate situation the BBC tends to be in. And as I say continually to the people on the left, you should love and support the BBC as much as humanly possible, because the BBC is a fantastic British institution and it's something that we should support. There's nothing quite like it in the world. It provides a lot of employment in the media industry in the UK. It provides something roughly between, if I'm correct, I'm sure someone will correct me, but I'm sure the BBC contributes around like 1 to 1.5% of the UK's GDP. I think it does now. I can't remember if that's correct or not, but that's a substantial amount of GDP. And of course, you've got to remember the BBC iPlayer was the first streaming service in the world. The first streaming service in the world. What about Mrs. Brown's Boys? Well, the BBC isn't perfect. The BBC isn't perfect. And may we remember, Mrs. Brown's Boys came from Ireland, so that's where it truly began. So anyway, we'll continue on with this. Here we are. So perhaps even more shocking is the implication that the British political system is run by a bunch of people with an overblown sense of entitlement, including many unelected individuals who seem to be focused on their own interests rather than what's best for the country. Shocking, but there you go. So these are just some of the points that we are going to get to. So Boris Johnson once jokingly told him it would be, quote, ludicrous for him to be PM. And that he thought the idea that David Cameron was PM and that George Osborne wanted to be PM was also ludicrous. Well, may we live in ludicrous times, which unfortunately we do. I agree, Boris. Why on earth would you want to be PM then if you think it was such a ludicrous idea? But of course, this was whole part of the right-wing agenda takeover plan that was plotted to bring Boris to power. The free market fundamentalists who are currently in charge, shall we say, of the Parliamentary Conservative Party are absolutely in charge, and they are the ones that put Boris in power because they needed a frontman to drum up support for all their crazy, daft ideas that they're going to try and put through, like wanting to completely eliminate all of Britain's tariffs to 0% so that everything coming into the country doesn't get a tariff, meaning how on earth is Britain going to generate income from the tariffs, let alone how much it would stand to lose from no longer taking this. That's the situation we're looking at. Like I say, these free market fundamentalists, they're the ones running the country, and yet that is the plan that they openly want to do. Anyway, we'll continue with this. So, Laura Kuenssberg repeatedly accusing Cummings of making this personal and suggests that he's only speaking out because he wants revenge, which he repeatedly refutes, essentially attacking him on personality and undermining his credibility rather than investigating and questioning his claims. She did both question his claims, and I'm sure that they are almost certainly investigating those claims. I would not be surprised if there is some other stuff that maybe comes out this week that maybe even backs up more of what Cummings had to say about this. But it is entirely right, though, for Kuenssberg to ask that question. Is it personal for Cummings? Is it about revenge? And even if it is personal and revenge, these claims don't change or in any light, they don't negatively disaffect these claims that he has made. Of course it's personal for him. He was pushed out when he didn't want to go. Of course this is a bit of revenge for him. But that doesn't change any of the nature of these revelations in any way, shape, or form. So, on the government's handling of COVID, Cummings is clear. The people in charge were simply not fit for the job, and Johnson wasn't taking the threat seriously. Johnson was effectively expecting business to continue as normal, cabinet ministers were still meeting face-to-face, and Johnson insisted on meeting the Queen in person for his weekly visits. And that is even more shocking. Boris Johnson could have killed the Queen. He could have given the Queen COVID. And of course, as we know, old people who have had COVID have been easily amongst the highest mortality rates about it. So he could have not only killed the Queen, but probably Prince Philip as well. And maybe even given the rest of the royal family COVID. So that, to be honest, is shocking. And even as he said, it's not mentioned there. He was Cummings said he convinced him by saying, look, you could kill the Queen. And he said, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Which just goes to show you how seriously he was not taking this. But that's the Prime Minister that we have. And by the way, people expecting that somehow, Boris was going to be fit for the job or he was going to be a good Prime Minister. We've known he was going to be like this for years. Boris Johnson has a long track record of being a liar, a complete and utter charlatan, and essentially failing upwards. And trust me, it would have been, like I say, I'm not a monarchist in any way, shape, or form. But the fact that Boris still wanted to go and visit her and could have killed her, to me shows a level of not only disrespect for her as a person, but just outright a callousness during this entire argument. I mean, like I say, I don't like the Queen, and I'm not going to really care one way or the other, when she dies. But her being taken out like this by Boris Johnson, not a fate that she deserves, to be honest. So, Cummings claims the government's initial plan for handling the COVID outbreak, aka Plan A, was to pursue a herd immunity agenda. Shock horror, that's what we'd thought of long. That's what they've tried to deny. And I'm sure when we have that COVID investigation, it will come out that that was indeed the first plan they wanted. They wanted to follow a herd immunity agenda. So, Koonsberg then repeatedly accuses Cummings of lying because he didn't tell the whole truth about his trip to Durham, again attacking his credibility. Cummings insists everything he said at the time was true, but then he'd left out the primary reason for him leaving, which is that he said had something to do with security issues at his home, issues that he didn't want to talk about publicly at the time. Again, any investigations from someone who is a foreign source or someone who is directly in the enemy camp that is changing their minds, who has a history of lying, like he did with his trip to Durham, she is fully in her right to question him about that. And if Cummings has already that black mark against him and his personality, there is no reason for her not to question him on that. Like I say, she's doing her job, something which you accused earlier in this article of saying that she wasn't doing. But there you go. So, Koonsberg continues the attack on Cummings' credibility by questioning the claim he made about trying to test his eyesight by driving his car around Durham. Then she flat out accuses him of lying and suggests that the truth was that he just decided to go on a family trip for his wife's birthday. Again, it's not really an attack on his credibility. She is generally asking him a question about driving. Yes, it's perfectly reasonable to test your eyesight. Perfectly reasonable to test your eyesight by going for a drive around Durham. Because I'm sure that excuse, if you went and tested your eyesight around Durham and ended up in a crash, I'm sure that would held up perfectly in court. Oh, you don't understand, Your Honour. The person in the passenger seat next to me was my optician, and he was testing my eyesight. Again, I'd prefer Cummings if he generally came out and 100% just went forward and just said, yeah, I went out for a trip because it was my wife's birthday. We were fed up of being stuck in the house. We went out for a trip. You know what? Might have been a bad thing to do at the time, but you know what? I would respect him at least for being honest. So I have no problem. I have no problem with her calling him a liar on that and wanting him to tell the truth about that, because I too would probably question Dominic about those claims. But there you go. So this next one. So Cummings tells us that Johnson had initially did not want the country to go into the first lockdown, and that he had said repeatedly at various meetings, then after the first wave had passed, Johnson returned to work. Having recovered from COVID himself, he seemed convinced that it had been a good idea to lock down. However, according to Cummings, Johnson quickly changed his tune again. After the Telegraph and various parts of the media and even the Tory party started screaming and decided that it would be better to run with herd immunity strategy and let COVID wash through the country rather than handicap the economy. As we've said today, even in the House of, I don't know, again, something else that happened today in the House of Parliament, you saw a basic intelligence test failed by most of the Tory MPs. The MPs were today back in the House of Parliament, and not surprisingly, everyone in the House of Parliament, except very select Tories, most of them were, again, the free market fundamentalists that we were talking about earlier, have been very, very specific about COVID, denying it, wanting to, again, end lockdowns. There shouldn't be lockdowns. There shouldn't be furlough. People should be out working. Essentially, wanting people to go out, catch COVID and die. If we had followed that plan, we would be seeing numbers like we see in the US and Brazil. I mean, in Brazil, COVID is just turning into a nightmare. Bolsonaro has well and truly done a number on that country with COVID. It's gotten to a point, I think, where I think there isn't a person in Brazil who doesn't know someone who hasn't died from COVID. Like, that's how serious it is over there. And that's what it could have been like here. But of course, what happened, certain members of the Tories, who were, again, very much responsible and very much were the ones, shall we say, for putting Boris Johnson in power so that they could enact their agenda, wanted to get involved with that. But there you go. So it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes about all this. It really does speak volumes about all this. But there you go. And Salvin Silverstream. Unfortunately, that was in the first hour. We've already covered that. We've already covered that in great detail. Like I say, we are on YouTube as well. So if you want to pop over to YouTube and watch the video after, I think it's also owned by Twitch channel as well. I think it is. So you should be able to watch it after we finish. But yeah, if you want my 2 cents on it, it's madness. It really is. It's absolute madness. And I can't believe our government is doing it. Sums it up. But anyway, back to the Cummings interview. So, next one. In September, Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty told Downing Street of their concerns and suggested that we needed an icebreaker and that we should consider hitting it hard and early. But Johnson was refusing to back the restriction because he didn't want to be seen in an argument with Keir Starmer. Sorry, in an agreement with Keir Starmer. He also had a number of Tory MPs demanding that he reject another lockdown. MPs who Cummings claims were spouting all kinds of fake news about COVID. And then he had the Telegraph screaming at him, which Cummings says Johnson would refer to as my real boss. Says it all. Says it all. Like I said at the previous point, we are being run by absolute free market fundamentalists at this point. No ifs, ands, or buts or ways around it. They are absolute lunatics from start to finish. And of course, they were partaking in this anti-COVID nonsense, because in the House of Parliament today, all those very MPs were the ones who weren't wearing masks. And when were asked to wear masks by the Speaker of the House, they refused. So we know today exactly who those Tory MPs were shouting at Boris Johnson not to have another lockdown. And of course, him saying the Telegraph is his true boss, well, of course it is, because the second he leaves office as Prime Minister, where do you think he's going to go back to work at? Of course, he's going to go right back to the Telegraph. So, according to Cummings, even by October, Johnson was saying, it's all nonsense and lockdowns don't work anyway. And his attitude was, well, this is all terrible, but the people who are dying are essentially all over 80. And we can't kill the economy just because of people dying over 80. I cannot tell you that word for word what, a couple of months ago now, in my very YouTube comment section, that was repeated word for word. And I found it so eerie that someone a couple of months ago had literally said that on my YouTube channel, down in the comments, literally word for word. That, to me, is frightening, because how much of Johnson and the Tories are tied up in their free market fundamentalist mindset so much that they just do not care about people in this country. That says it all. And just remember, just a couple of months ago, Johnson was saying that we should let this run wild and let the bodies pile high. And of course, people are going around and saying, oh, Cummings is making up. Boris never said that. Well, here's Boris saying this. That now lends credibility to when Cummings came out and said, Boris said, let the bodies pile high. This, as I said at the beginning of this segment, trust but verify. Trust but verify. And that is exactly what's happened here. Anyway, next one. Cummings is clear. Johnson put his own political interest ahead of people's lives. Are we shocked by that? Should you be shocked by that? If you know anything about Boris Johnson, if you know anything, a single thing about Boris Johnson, have followed any of his political career or his career before becoming a politician, then you know the only person that matters to Boris Johnson is Boris Johnson. That is not a surprising revelation, but I'll tell you what, it is nice to have it said openly from someone who worked so closely with Boris Johnson. So, talking about Brexit, however, Cummings is unnervingly non-committal. No one on earth knows if Brexit was a good idea, but then he insists it was a good thing that Brexit happened. Again, it would be very interesting, and like I say, why I would love to speak to Dominic Cummings to dig more deeper into that, what he thinks about Britain, in what he thought about, again, Britain being in the EU, why he wanted them to leave. You know, doesn't make, you know, that's why I want to make, that's why I want to have a conversation with him. I want to dig deeper into those things and his beliefs about it, because you don't hear that much in interviews like this. So he then admits that the 350 million a week figure emblazoned on the side of the Brexit bus was essentially a lie. But they did it anyway because they knew it would send the Remain campaign into meltdown. Of course, getting Cummings to admit that he had lied, as had others, including Johnson, of course, and demonstrating it that he is thus capable of lying, is about the most damaging thing you could do to his credibility. Again, this is my big problem with this article. Why on earth are you so upset that Johnson here has just admitted about lying about the 350 million a week figure? That is an absolute fantastic win for any of us who were Remainers. We said this was a lie back then, and we've said since that it is a lie because it still has not come true. And as I've said before, people in the North who voted for Brexit voted believing, and that they were being told by the Brexiteers. Remember, I'm from the north of England, so I talk to these people, that they were being told by the Brexiteers they thought their lives were being made better. That is why they voted for Brexit. That is not what they are going to get, because I've said it before, all of the UK's problems were not caused by Britain being in the EU. They were caused by a Conservative government who was doubling and tripling down at the time on austerity. And that is the situation that we are in. It does not damage Cummings' credibility, essentially saying that he is lying. Like I say, his role in Bernard Castle and the ridiculous lies he told about that, just come clean about it. I generally, at this point, yeah, okay, you did a bad thing, but hey, at least you're being honest about the reason why you did it now. You know? And the fact that he admits that to a lie now is yet another pin in the balloon of Brexit. But of course, at this point, the balloon's so full of pins that it went bust long ago. But at least it's nice to hear from their own horse's mouth that yes, that figure was indeed a lie and indeed used to get people to vote for Brexit. But there you go. Where were we? Yes, there we are. So, Cummings admits that he supported Johnson's leadership campaign, even though he knew Johnson was useless, because he felt that it would be easier for Cummings to be able to manipulate him and get him to do what he wanted to do. He then adds he only decided to support Johnson in the 2019 election because the choice was between Johnson and Corbyn, and he preferred Johnson. Essentially, Cummings there was selecting the lesser of what he thought was the lesser of two evils. Not surprising that he wanted to manipulate him. Cummings seems to me like a guy who wants change in the country, and as we'll see later on, we'll see what that is. So Cummings then goes on to admit that there is a network of a few dozen really influential people, including himself, who have been involved in the Leave campaign, who have made the decisions for the country, as well as who was going to be the next PM. Not surprising, it's the Tory party. Does not surprise me at all. In the UK, does not surprise me in the least. They straight up said, we don't want Corbyn anywhere near, so we're going to have this far-right coup, get Brexit over and done with, and Boris is the perfect cheerleader to be the Prime Minister. Again, it all works perfect. And it's good to know, of course, that, again, this actually exists. So he then claims that Johnson came to him shortly before he was going to be appointed Tory leader and PM and asked him to join his team and help him get the party out of the mess that he was in at the time. Cummings adds that he only agreed to do so as long as Johnson agreed to his terms. He suggested that he wanted Johnson to agree to a, quote, serious agenda. The question Koonsberg failed to ask was, whose agenda? Again, I'll agree. That was actually a failed agenda, something, again, I would like him to ask. I would like to know what that agenda was. But again, who knows if that question will ever get answered. So, Cummings then also admits that he was behind the strategy adopted by his team of the negotiating for the Brexit deal, demanding a good deal and then threatening Brussels with a no deal if they did not meet their demands. His guidance to ministers at the time was to keep bulldozing, prolong, refuse assent, and use extreme measures. And that is exactly what we saw. So we can assume from this, as I said before, that Boris was put in by a far-right coup, that ultimately Cummings was part of that coup. That's, again, not a surprise. I've suspected that for a while, but again, nice to have confirmation. Nice to have confirmation of what is being said is true, to be honest. So, at one point, Cummings described some of the MPs, even though on his side of the debate, as absolute morons. That's just very cathartic, to be honest. Very cathartic. On why he left Downing Street, Cummings states that Johnson was unhappy because the media had labelled Johnson a puppet of the Vote Leave campaign, and because Cummings was pursuing his own political agenda rather than working for the things that mattered to Johnson, i.e. handling the media and campaigning. Johnson says he had no and campaigning Johnson. He says he had no real political plan other than buy more trains, buy more buses, and build a tunnel to Ireland. They had also fallen out over Johnson's handling of COVID, and Cummings was unhappy about Johnson's then girlfriend, Carrie Salmons, interfering with appointments. Not surprised, Johnson has always been obsessed with infrastructure projects. Why? Because it gives Johnson his grand opportunity to have a grand old day out. And then he can say, look, I built this bridge. Isn't it fantastic? Why does he do that? It's all about a very simple game of politics. Because regardless whatever general election you may fight, you can turn around and go, see that bridge there? We built that bridge. Not them. We built that bridge. It's a very simple election strategy. But That's just how simple Boris Johnson really is. So, Cummings claims that Carrie had decided after the 2019 election that she wanted to be the person pulling the puppet strings, not Cummings, and his Vote Leave network, and not Whitehall. Not surprising. It's not the first time that Carrie Salmons, or should we say Carrie Johnson now, is continuing to come up in these conversations, because for all we know, if Cummings says what is right, that it's really easy to manipulate Johnson, then why not her be the master manipulator now that Dominic Cummings is out? It's perfectly reasonable for him to do that. So, next one. Cummings then admits that within days of the 2019 general election, Carrie had started to make moves to try and get rid of him and many of the people he had worked with. So he and his Vote Leave network immediately began to discuss how they could get rid of Johnson. That's very interesting. That's very interesting that after you essentially pull a very successful coup to get the free market fundamentalists in power, which I maybe think that Cummings may very well be a part of. I don't know what his personal politics are regarding that. But again, something I'd like to ask him. It's very likely that after all, you've got Boris in, you've secured a very nice majority. So why not just change Boris Johnson out for someone else who's going to be a lot more reliable for the things you want to do? Again, very interesting. Get rid of Johnson. There we are. Cummings then goes on to describe the current political system across all parties and in Whitehall as insular and rigged, where only MPs get to decide who scales the greasy pole. I agree with you, although it's not the case in Labour, where everyone in the Labour Party, regardless, gets a vote. I would like to see definitely more, maybe switching to a more primary system, where you have like primaries where the candidates get whittled down as it goes on. And I suppose to an extent that's what we have with members doing that. But again, it is nice when you compare it to the Tory party, where I think you've got to have been a member for at least 3 years, or maybe even longer than that, to actually get a vote who's becomes the MP. Or should we say leader of your party. So, Cummings admits that he did have to break with the norms in order to get things done. And he gives an example that allegedly, due to EU bureaucracy, PPE shipments from China would have been delayed by months if he hadn't intervened. He explains that he had no choice but to intervene given what we had as a PM who behaved like a shopping trolley. Again, given the fact that the EU itself and many other EU countries were also engaged in getting as much PPE as they could, not surprising. That, of course, it wouldn't also not surprise me if Cummings encouraged much of the VIP lane that we saw going about during that time. So it would not surprise me in the least if that did turn out to be the case. So, and the final one, the interview ends with Cummings describing ways in which to change the political system in this country so that we can actually solve problems for people outside of the existing current power structures. He suggests that it might be possible to create different types of networks of power in the world that can do things without necessarily having to go directly to go and control the existing parties now, or even the civil service. So you either have to take over one of those parties or create a new one that displaces them, or create some kind of entity which then ends up kind of assimilating or disrupting that power. Again, interesting. Sounds a bit to me like devolution. And like I say, devolution is something I support. I think the power in this, in the UK, rather than us being very centralized, needs to be local, regional, and national. That's what we need to break it down into. And I think we need to be giving more regional places and as well as local places more money and decisions on how they spend that money, rather than having the current situation is having to bid and compete against it. So again, I do think that would be good. I also definitely think we need to change to PR, the PR system, and have the STV system, which is again called a single transferable vote. That would be an incredible change for democracy in this country. And if we could affect that voting system on either to get how it elects MPs or even the House of Lords, if we can get one or the other or both, fantastic. But either doing one of those will create a seismic change in British politics. So anyway, he continues. Cummings finishes by admitting that he and his network are currently working to try and remove Johnson as PM because Johnson is now just intervening, by which he means making things up. And Cummings believes people deserve to know the truth, or otherwise we're all doomed to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Good on him for people wanting to come out and know the truth. I'm perfectly in favor of that. I think people should. And I think it is good to have a good informed electorate about issues. Of course, states do deserve to have state secrets, and of course there are various reasons behind that. Of course, you don't want your secret service or MI5 or MI6 talking publicly open about their policies or operations they've got going on. Of course, states need to have some extent to be secret. But that is it. Overall, not surprising. Not surprising in the least, given his last, should we say, 7-hour marathon he gave before MPs. It's pretty much everything that he said before, during that session, and more. And it wouldn't surprise me if in a couple of weeks' time, maybe we saw more stuff come out from Cummings about this. So wouldn't be surprising if we saw that. Of course, I have said before, I would love to speak with Dominic Cummings. I think it would be very, very interesting. I'd like to get to know what his actual politics are and what policies he would support from, again, one of these intervening parties or such as that, again, he talks about. I think it would be quite an interesting conversation. Other than that, I think it'd be very interesting. I think this is, again, new revelations, and I think that it is ammunition that people on the left and basically who are anti-Tory need to know and need to circulate far and wide. And remember, don't just attack them now. You need to be planting seeds for the next general election, because the next general election currently is 3 years away. But if they get rid of the Fixed Term Parliament Act, it could be 2 years. It could be a year and a half. It could be 6 months. We just don't know. So always be preparing to fight a general election. Just because it's 6 years away doesn't mean that you shouldn't start preparing for it now. So with that said, thank you all for watching today. Thank you so much for coming to join me on this. Like I say, we did change the topic. We were going to talk about Nigel Farage's sudden switch to GB News, and like many people have said, it's probably the first time the rat has joined a sinking ship, because GB News reported, was it this week or it might have been last week, they had a viewing figure of 0, which for a 24-hour rolling news network should be sounding political alarms. But as I've said before, this thing has been funded not to fail. So as many people have said, it won't last a year. I think it will certainly be around for at least 3 years, because this has been funded not to fail. So it's going to be around for some time. But other than that, as always, thanks for watching. Do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a link, one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And I'm off now. Probably going to get a cool myself down, because it's warm. It's going to be one of those nights where it's, I don't know what you describe it as, moist, not moist. Yeah, it's going to be one of those warm nights. even myself, I'm like, ugh. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much. Humid, that's it. Thank you very much. Humid. Going to be a very humid night indeed. Yes, so as always, thank you very much for everyone for watching, for joining us evening. Like I say, please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, thank you very much everyone for watching. If you would like to catch me live next time, the next live will probably be on, as normal, the Saturday morning Good Morning Walk we have at 8 a.m. UK time. And of course, we will be back next Wednesday as well, live at the same time, 7 p.m. UK time, for another session of this. I don't know what we might be doing, but again, it depends what happens. We might be talking more about the Northern Ireland situation, because I'm sure that could heat up very, very quickly. But needless to say, I think that's going to be the big bust up of the summer. But as always, do remember to click that subscribe button as well if you are new, because we've got videos coming out all the time as well about UK politics and the goings on in UK politics and the ridiculousness that is going on as well. So, I'll see you down below in those comments as well. So, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.